My sister called our father a good-for-nothing because he couldn't afford her favorite restaurant. She didn't know he had been saving for 8 months to take her there for her birthday. My father never went to college. He loaded trucks at a warehouse 6 days a week for 23 years. His hands looked older than the rest of him. Rough skin, cracked knuckles, a bent pinky from a pallet that fell on it when I was in middle school. He never got it fixed because $200 was grocery money for 3 weeks. He raised me and my sister Gianna by himself after our mother left. He made us lunches every morning before his shift started at 5. He braided Gianna's hair before school because she wanted a French braid like a girl in her class, and our father learned how from a tutorial on the library computer during his break. He didn't buy himself new shoes for 3 years because Gianna needed braces. He wore the same boots until the sole split and he glued it back together with adhesive from the hardware store. He cut his own hair with clippers in the bathroom mirror because the barber down the street charged $18, and that was a tank of gas. He kept his coffee cold in a thermos so he wouldn't have to buy it at the gas station on the way to work. He clipped coupons from the Sunday paper and stuck them on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a fish that Gianna made him in 2nd grade. That is the man my sister called a loser. It was a Saturday in March. Gianna was 20 and I was 22. She had been talking for weeks about a restaurant downtown called Bellamy's. Her coworker Josephine had been there and Gianna became obsessed. The cheapest entree was $45. She asked our father if he could take us. He looked at the menu on her phone and I saw his face do the math. 3 entrees, drinks, tax, tip. Close to $200 for 1 meal. He said maybe somewhere else, somewhere nice but not that expensive. Gianna rolled her eyes. She said you always do this. She said her coworker's father takes their family out all the time and never complains about prices. Our father said, Gianna, I'm not saying no, I'm saying let's find something we can all enjoy. She said what you can do is never enough. She said you didn't go to college and you work at a warehouse and you're 51 years old and you still can't afford to take your kids out. You're a loser, Dad. You're a good-for-nothing loser and I'm tired of pretending you're not. Our father didn't say anything. He sat at the dining table in the same chair he sat in every night after work. His hands were folded and he just looked down. Gianna went to her room and shut the door. I sat across from him. I said, Dad, she doesn't mean that. He said it's fine. He picked up his water and his hand was shaking just enough that I could see the surface move. 2 weeks later was Gianna's 21st birthday. When I got home that afternoon, I noticed the jar was gone. Our father kept a glass jar on the top shelf of his closet. I had seen it once when I helped him put away laundry. It was full of cash. 5s and 10s and 20s folded tight. I never asked because it wasn't my business, but it was gone now. I went through the dining room and found a piece of paper on the counter. A printed reservation confirmation for Bellamy's. 3 guests. Dinner at 7. Made 8 months ago. He had booked it before Gianna even knew the place existed. He had been saving cash since last July. $5, $10, whatever he could pull from a paycheck that already stretched past breaking, for 8 months. And then 2 weeks before that day, his daughter called him a loser at his own dining table. The reservation was canceled. I could see where he had drawn a pen across the paper. The jar was empty. The money was back in the bank. That night, he made Gianna a birthday cake from a box mix because he always made our cakes himself. He put candles on it and sang happy birthday by himself because I was the only one standing there with him. He gave her a card with $40 inside. She said thanks and went out with her friends. She didn't eat a single piece. I ate 2. He wrapped the rest, washed the dishes, dried them, put them away. I said, Dad, I saw the reservation. He stopped wiping the counter. I said, you saved for 8 months. He said it doesn't matter. I said it matters to me. He folded the towel and said she wanted something nice, and I wanted to give it to her. That's all. He turned off the overhead light and went to his room. I told Gianna 3 days later. Cash in a jar. Booked the table in July. Canceled it after what you said. Gianna didn't say anything for a long time. She went to our father's room and opened the door. I stood in the hallway where I could see them both. He was on the edge of his bed in his work shirt, holding a cracked paperback. He looked up and smiled, small and tired. He said, hey, birthday girl, you have fun tonight? Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't ripped his heart out 2 weeks ago. Gianna's voice cracked. She said, Dad, did you really book that restaurant? He paused. He set the book down. He said, don't worry about it, G. It was just an idea. She said, for 8 months? He didn't answer. He picked the book back up. He said, you should get some rest. You got work in the morning. That was all he gave her. Because that's who he is. He swallows everything and keeps going. Gianna pulled the door closed. I expected tears. I expected regret. I expected her to say something like, I need to fix this, or I can't believe I said that to him. But her face was hard. Her jaw was tight and her eyes were dry. And she looked at me like I was the one who did something wrong. She said, why did you tell me that? I said, because you needed to know. She said, no. You told me because you wanted me to feel like garbage. You always make me the bad guy. I felt the floor shift under me. Not the real floor. The one inside me. The one that held up the idea that my sister and I were on the same side. That floor cracked right through. I said you called him a loser to his face. That's not me making you the bad guy. That's you being the bad guy. She said he could have told me himself. He didn't. So maybe it wasn't that important to him. Then she walked to her room and shut the door. Over the next few days, I watched my father become someone I didn't recognize. The morning lunches stopped. 2 brown bags on the counter with names and marker and a smiley face. Gone. He came home and walked straight to his room. He stopped sitting at the dining table. He ate alone in his bedroom, plate balanced on his knee. We always watched a home renovation show together on Thursdays. I knocked. He said, not tonight, sweetheart. I'm tired. Tired was the answer for everything now. Tired when I asked about dinner. Tired when I asked if he wanted to take a walk. Tired when I asked if he was okay. The light behind his eyes was going out and I was watching it happen. One night, I made pasta with the sauce he liked from the jar at the grocery store and set his plate at his spot. He came through the door, took off his boots, and sat down. He picked up his fork. Then he put it back down. He said I already ate at work. He said goodnight and went to his room. I walked outside to grab something from my car and looked through the window of his truck. His lunch bag was on the passenger seat. I could see through the zipper that it was full. The sandwich still wrapped. The apple still there. He hadn't eaten at work. He hadn't eaten at all. He lied because he didn't want me to worry. Gianna acted like nothing happened. The only time she talked to him was when she needed something. Hey Dad, we're out of milk. Dad, can you move your truck? He said okay every time and did it. Transactional. Nothing else. I caught her in the hallway one afternoon. I said you haven't said anything anything to Dad. She sighed. She said, I don't know what you want me to say. I said, sorry. That's the word. She crossed her arms. She said, I'm not going to apologize for wanting a normal life. I said, this is our normal life. He is our normal life, and he's disappearing because of what you said. She stepped around me and left. That night, I called my friend Todd. I told him everything. The jar, the reservation, what Gianna said, what our father did. When I finished, he said, your dad sounds like the best man I've ever heard of, and your sister sounds like she's scared to admit she was wrong because then she has to admit she's been wrong about him for a long time. He said you can't force her to apologize, but you can make sure your dad knows what he means to at least one of his daughters. I went to our father's closet. The jar was still there, empty. I brought it to my room and put a $5 bill in it, then a 10. I didn't have a plan. I just knew he filled this jar for 8 months because he loved someone, and now I was going to fill it again because someone in this house needed to. A few days later, I saw Josephine at a coffee shop near my work, Gianna's coworker, the one whose father supposedly takes their family out all the time. I sat down across from her. I said, you're the one who told Gianna about Bellamy's, right? She nodded. She said, did Gianna ever make it? I said no. Then Josephine said something that stopped me cold. She said my dad took us there once. For my parents' anniversary. He got a bonus that month. We don't usually eat like that. I said Gianna told our father your dad takes your family out all the time. Josephine laughed. A real laugh. Like I'd said something that didn't make sense. She said all the time? No. My dad's a plumber. We eat at the diner on the corner. Bellamy's was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I sat there. Gianna had stood at our dining table and told our father her coworker's dad was a better father. And it was a lie. Not a lie Josephine told her. A lie Gianna told herself. Josephine's dad was a plumber who saved up for one nice dinner. Same as ours. The whole story Gianna built in her head was made up to make our father look small. I drove home and walked out to the garage. Our father was at his workbench sorting tools that were already sorted. Wrenches laid out in a row by size. Screwdrivers going back into slots they came out of. He'd organized that bench last weekend. He was just moving things around to keep his hands busy. I sat on the step. The garage smelled like motor oil and the sawdust that's been ground into the concrete for years. He knew I was there. He always knew. But he didn't turn around until he finished the row. Then he looked over his shoulder and said, hey kiddo. I said, Dad, why didn't you ever tell Gianna about the reservation yourself? He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said because she was right about some of it. I am 51. I do work in a warehouse. I've been doing the same job since before you were born. I just didn't think that made me a loser. His voice broke on that last word. A tiny crack. Like a glass that's been holding too much weight for too long and finally gives. He looked away. Toward the wall. Toward the shelf with the cans of old paint and the broken flashlight he kept saying he'd fix. I said, Dad, you're not a loser. You're the furthest thing from a loser I've ever seen. He shook his head. Slow. Like he wanted to believe me but something heavier was sitting on top of it. He said your mother left because this life wasn't enough. Maybe Gianna's just seeing what your mother saw. Our mother Lilac left when I was 11 and Gianna was 9. She packed 2 suitcases while we were at school and was gone before we got home. He had carried her leaving around like a verdict. I said Mom left because she's selfish, not because of you. And Gianna is not Mom. He didn't say anything to that. I went inside. The reservation paper was still on the counter. He never threw it away. I folded it and put it in my pocket. Then I went to my room and pulled up an old photo I'd taken of the jar back when I was helping him put away laundry. The bills rolled tight, colored rubber bands, red and blue and yellow, the closet light hitting the glass. I'd saved it because it looked pretty. I didn't know what I was looking at then. I was looking at 8 months of love from a man who never said the word. I dug through the drawer next to the stove and found the receipt from the morning of Gianna's birthday. 1 box cake mix, 1 can of frosting, 1 pack of candles, $7.12. He bought it the morning of because he canceled the $200 reservation and was still going to make her birthday mean something. $7.12. That's what he had left and he gave it. I had everything I needed. I just didn't know when to use it. 2 days later, Gianna came home and dropped her bag and said, by the way, I invited Mom this weekend. I stopped stirring the rice on the stove. I said, what did you just say? She said, Mom, I invited her to the get-together on Saturday. I found her on social media. We've been talking for a few weeks. She wants to reconnect. Like reconnect was a normal word for a woman who left her 2 daughters with a man she didn't think was worth staying for. I said, you invited the woman who abandoned us into Dad's house? She said, it's my house too, and she's still our mother. That night I called Todd. He said, do you think Gianna invited your mom to prove a point? Like, look, this is the parent who could give me more? It clicked into place like a key. Gianna wasn't reaching out because she missed her mother. She was recruiting backup. She was bringing in the one person who had already looked at our father and decided he wasn't worth staying for, and putting that person in our living room as proof that Gianna wasn't the only one who thought this way. Todd said, maybe your dad needs to hear it in front of everyone, not just Gianna, everyone. The next evening, I sat across from my father at the dining table. I said, Dad, Gianna invited Mom this weekend. He said, I know. She told me this morning. I said, and you're okay with it? He turned his glass slowly on the wood. He said, your sister wants to know her mother. That's her right. I won't be the one to take that from her. He was going to iron a shirt and clean the house and buy food he couldn't afford and open his door to a woman who walked out of it because his daughter asked him to. I knew that wasn't going to change, so my plan was going to change. Saturday came. People started showing up around 7. Gianna's coworkers filled the living room. Josephine was one of the first. Our father was at the counter setting out food on paper plates. He had ironed his shirt and combed his hair back, and he looked nervous in a way that made my chest hurt. Then the door opened and Lilac walked in. Nice blouse, dark pants, a bag on her shoulder that probably cost more than our father's truck payment. Hair done, nails done. She looked like a woman who'd spent the last 10 years taking care of herself and nobody else. Gianna hugged her. Lilac stepped inside and looked around. Same couch, same throw blanket, same school photos in dollar store frames. She smiled and said, look at this place. Hasn't changed a bit. Light, cute. But I heard the tone under it. Nothing's changed because nothing ever could. Our father came out of the dining area. He put his hand out like she was someone from work. She shook it. He said, welcome. Make yourself at home. Polite. Steady. The same voice he used when the neighbor borrowed the lawnmower, but his jaw clenched when he said it. A small thing. Holding something behind his teeth he would never let out. Lilac said thank you and walked past him. She found the center of the room like it was built for her. Within 5 minutes, she was the main event. Her apartment in some city therapy, her real estate job, her yoga class, her trip to somewhere with mountains, finding herself, she said. Finding herself. Like losing her daughters was a pit stop on the road to personal growth. She didn't mention our father once. She didn't ask how he was doing. She didn't ask about his job or his health or the 23 years he spent raising the 2 girls she left behind. She didn't mention us as kids at all. Not the braids, not the lunches, not the birthday cakes, nothing. Like those years didn't exist for her. Like she stepped out of this house and the whole life she left behind just disappeared. Gianna stood next to her the whole time, glowing. That's the only word for it. She kept touching Lilac's arm, laughing at things that weren't funny, introducing her to coworkers like she was showing off a trophy. This is my mom, she'd say. Every time she said it, I felt something twist because our mother was not something to show off. Our mother was someone who left. Then she put her hand on Gianna's shoulder and said to the room, I always told the girls they could do better than this neighborhood. You have to want more for yourself. Gianna nodded along. I looked through the dining doorway. Our father was alone, refilling a chip bowl with money I knew he didn't have, while the woman who left him told strangers his life wasn't enough. That's when I decided it was time. I stepped into the living room. I said, Josephine, can I ask you something? She looked up. I said you told Gianna about Bellamy's. She said your dad takes your family there all the time. Josephine's face scrunched up. She said all the time? No, we went once, for my parents' anniversary. My dad saved up because he got a bonus. We don't usually do stuff like that. The room got quiet in layers. Gianna's face changed. The glow she had next to Lilac went out. I looked at her. I said, funny, that's exactly what our dad did. I pulled the reservation paper out of my back pocket, soft from being folded and refolded. I held it up. I said, this is a confirmation for Bellamy's. 3 guests. Dinner at 7. Made 8 months before Gianna's 21st birthday. He booked this last July. I pulled the photo of the jar up on my phone and passed it to the closest person. I said he saved cash on his closet shelf, 5s and 10s, for 8 months, because his daughter wanted something nice. I looked at Gianna. Her chin was shaking. I said, and then 2 weeks before your birthday, you stood at our dining table and called him a good-for-nothing loser. He canceled the reservation that night. He took the money out of the jar. And then on your birthday, he made you a cake from a box mix and sang happy birthday by himself because I was the only one there with him, and you left without eating a single piece. The room was completely still. Josephine had her hand over her mouth. My phone moved from one set of hands to another, the photo of the jar glowing on the screen. Lilac stood near the wall looking at the reservation paper like it was in a language she didn't understand. I turned to her. I said, and you left this man. You left him with 2 little girls and he raised us alone. He braided Gianna's hair from a tutorial on a library computer. He wore broken shoes for 3 years so she could have braces. He has never once complained. He has never once asked for thanks. And he's at the counter right now refilling a chip bowl for a party he paid for with money he doesn't have, for a daughter who called him worthless, while hosting a woman who abandoned him. Lilac's mouth opened a little and closed. She looked past me toward the dining doorway like she was seeing something she didn't expect to find there. I turned back to Gianna. I said that man is not a loser. He is the best person in this room and he always has been. I saw movement and turned my head. There was our father, standing in the doorway, holding the chip bowl in both hands. I don't know how long he'd been there. His face was open and raw, like a door that had been locked for a long time just came undone. Gianna looked at him. She really looked at him. Not past him, not through him. She walked to him slow. Her face was wet. She got to the doorway and stopped right in front of him. She said, Dad. Her voice was barely there. She said, I'm so sorry. And then her face crumbled. The pride, the anger, the walls all fell at once. She said, I'm so sorry again. And her voice broke on the second sorry. Our father set the chip bowl down on the counter. He didn't rush. He opened his arms and wrapped them around her and held her. He put his hand on the back of her head and he said, I know, baby. I know. She buried her face in his chest and cried the kind of crying that comes from deep. I heard movement behind me. Lilac picked up her bag. She didn't say anything. She didn't try to explain. She walked to the front door, opened it, stepped out, and closed it behind her. Nobody stopped her. Nobody watched her leave. She walked out of our house for the second time, and this time it didn't matter at all. I sat down at the dining table, in our father's chair. I put my hands where his hands used to rest. The frosting-stained cake plate from Gianna's birthday was still on the counter pushed near the toaster, because he never throws anything away. Not the plate, not the reservation paper, not the hope. My phone buzzed. A text from Todd. How'd it go? I looked at my father in the doorway with his arms around Gianna. His hand on the back of her head was steady, not shaking. Not like the night at the dining table when he picked up his water glass and the surface trembled. His hand was still this time. Solid. I typed back 3 words. He's not invisible anymore. The chip bowl sat on the counter getting warm, and nobody bothered to finish it, and the party was over by the time anyone realized Lilac had already gone.